nudge. So nudge can be useful. Right now it's set to the grid of 1/8 or an eighth note. So how it works is and cool thing is if you see these 3 dots right here, if I either click that or if you click and drag left and right, it opens up some more settings essentially. So you can use these buttons. You can nudge the start, make it bigger. You can nudge the right side, make it smaller or bigger. And you can move the whole event by currently 8th note because it's following the grid. There are shortcuts for this. I suggest you learn them. Alt left is the start. Control moves the whole thing, and together control, or see, what was it? Alt shift, not alt control, okay. So I don't use nudge all that often for the ends and starts. I most of the time just cut stuff with the cut tool, split tool, I guess it's called. But yeah, that can be useful. The cool thing is you can change it from the grid if you want. Maybe you're moving like vocals and they're a little bit rushing or something, and you want them to be back just a little bit. You could do like a 30-second note, and then if you click the move, it goes back a 30-second note. Or maybe a 30-second note's too big. You could do even as small as 101 to 128. I don't even know what that is. And then you can just move stuff around quickly with control and arrow keys. So that's kind of a cool feature. Yeah. This snap to zero crossing, I need audio for that, so I'm gonna make something real quick to show you. I'm going to turn this MIDI into audio by rendering it. Control right click on the event, render in place with current settings, popped it in a new track underneath. So here's audio, and it muted the original. I'm going to click Z to make that bigger. So here's our waveform. If I wanted to like stitch 2 waveforms together, maybe it's a piano take where they wanted me to stitch them together in the middle of a note, or which is kind of hard to do, but essentially this tool, this button, can help make it so that there's not as many issues. There's no pops or clicks, because what happens is if you cut, and I gotta turn the grid off for this, which we'll talk about in a second. If I cut at the top of a waveform and tried to stitch it later, like that, like say these were different takes, and I got rid of this guy, and I was trying to stitch these together, that would give me a pop. Even if they're right next to each other and I tried to fade it, it would sound, well, I can show you actually. Here's where the scrub tool comes in. I don't know if you'll hear that. It's kind of quiet, but so there's a pop because it's at the top of the waveform. So the whole point of snap to zero crossing means if you're doing a cut, it will only allow you to do a cut like it. See how it's snapping around, where it's on the line where it is at the zero crossing. That's what that means. So if you did it here and like there, for example, and we try to push these guys together, there's no pop. And it might not be perfect, but it's going to be a lot better off than that pop. So that just like helps you cut in a useful spot. So you can leave that on or off, it doesn't really matter. If you're doing that specific work, it's probably a good idea to turn it on, or just remember that you got to cut where it's on the line. The grid and the snap, very useful tools. That means if I'm moving stuff around, right now it's going to stay on one of these lines set to the 8th note. And you can change it to do grid relative, which means relative to where it starts. So if I turn the grid off with J, or click this button, and I move it here, or maybe here. So you'll notice it's starting a bit before beat 2 of bar 0. And I turn the grid back on and do grid relative, it's going to be at that spot relative to where it started. If I do events, it's going to link to an event. See how it popped close to that? If I do shuffle, it's kind of the same thing. So you see the green line, it'll go there, but it can also go past and like replace. So if I go to this next one, it replaces that, gets rid of the auto behind, and stitches them together in a sense. It doesn't glue them together yet, but that would give us a pop, right? So I'm gonna Control Z that. Lastly, cursor. If my cursor's here, it's gonna link to my to the cursor. See that? These are just combinations, meaning it will do both, like grid and cursor, meaning it'll hit every 8th and the cursor. So if I put it back to grid, this is the grid type. So if I use, I guess I could show you this too. If I change it to 16th, it'll go to 16th notes. If I do it to quarter note, it's only on quarter notes. So that's using Quantize. This is the Quantize thing. We'll get to that in a second. If I use bar, it only does bars. So either bar 1 or bar 2. Zoom out to show you. If I do beat, it'll only do 1, 2, 3, 4 of whatever time signature you have. Adapt to zoom means if you get in closer, you'll see more lines and less lines if you zoom out. So, yeah. Like you'll see between those two zooms, I add lines, so that's how that would work. I like to use Quantize unless I'm trying to do something else specific, but I like Quantize. So Quantize, speaking of Quantize, this is the Quantize settings. Quantize means snapping things to the grid. So currently, if I moved it off the grid, and I had to get rid of snap to do that, and I have it selected and I press Q, that there, or the hotkey Q, it pops it right onto the grid. And it uses whatever grid you've set. So if I quantize it to 1 and I have it over here, it'll go to this bar, right? Because it's going per bar, or 8th note, or 16th note, or what have you. Quantize. That was interesting. Okay. This is soft quantize. I generally use this when I'm doing MIDI editing because I want it to sound realistic and human. Essentially what it means, I'm going to open this panel that shows you some of the settings. It means that I'm doing 70%. So if I do this, it's not going to go all the way to 1. Oh, it went the other way. So you'll see it's still like it's closer, but it's not all the way there. So that depends on what kind of work you're doing. Sometimes you might want 100% and sometimes not. You can also change the swing settings. You can change the grid in here. These are just the more in-depth settings. I think the swing is useful. Like if you want, then it'll take that as a spot to send things. So if you're playing a swing song, you might want to use that function if you're trying to get like a hi-hat to hit right, you know, rather than being on an even grid. And I like that you can change that percentage because everyone has their own grid, right? Everyone has their own feel for what a rounded grid should be like. So you can adjust that. And then, of course, if you wanted triplets, you can do that too. And it shows you what that looks like. Like if we did eighth note triplets, it shows you where it would quantize to. And it will just take whatever note you have or event you have and send it to the closest one. So that's Quantize. I don't use the MIDI CC on this big screen. Though I suppose you could sometimes. I don't think it would hurt to have it on. Audio warp is a whole thing. And let's dive into it. It's a good thing to know. So for audio warp, I'm gonna grab some drum sounds. Actually, this bass sound will do great, and I'm just gonna drag it on over here. There's a green thing, it'll create a track, boom. I'm gonna solo this for now. So this is gonna open some. If I double click the event, it opens up a bunch of things. We're not going to dive into this yet. I just wanted to show you what audio warp does. So essentially, I'm going to choose my hit points first. And you can see where it's chosen as like a hit. This one, it has doubled up. So like even though that's one note, it's given it two, so I'm going to adjust the threshold. It's kind of a close call though, because they're really, so this isn't going to be perfect. I think what you can do is change the minimum length and it gets rid of stuff like that. And then we can tighten it in so the softer hit notes are still triggered, but the minimum length, it gets rid of these extra hits. Okay, so we have hit points. If I go to audio, actually not there. So now that that's in there, you can see where these dotted lines, that's where the hit points are. If I quantize with audio warp on, and let's try 16th notes because I think it might be better. If I quantize, it brings those, oh, I had the soft quantize on. That means it only did it to 70%. I want to see what it looks like if it's 100%. So it popped them right on the line. So now it's going to sound funky, like it's not going to sound in time because we did it, like the original event was kind of in a weird position on the graph. It wasn't playing to any specific beat or drums or click track or anything like that. But essentially it will quantize the notes, kind of like if you were working with MIDI, which can be done really well and useful if you have tracks that need help with their timing and you don't want to go through individually and like cut and move stuff around. This gives you like a really good starting point. And you can always go in after the fact and look at audio warp. And now that we've done that, we can grab these events. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Struggling to, I forgot how to grab those. Oh, free warp. Okay. So you hover over something, see the line to the left of the little clock. I think you have to make sure that that's on where the orange lines are. And then you move. So it's kind of like a weird grabbing tool. The point is that white line, vertical white line, and then you can move stuff. So that could be really useful if you're trying to get stuff in time. Like if I wanted a really fast start, which would be dumb. But you could, right? The more you mess with audio, the more likely it is to sound fake. If I stretch that too long, you can kind of hear that it's like, I don't know, it's passable. And if it was in a full mix, you wouldn't notice. But, or probably wouldn't notice. Depends on how good your ears are. Okay, so that's audio warp. Pretty useful feature for sure. Audio alignment. Okay, so this is also a cool feature to help line things up. Say you had a bunch of background vocals, which maybe I'll just record some crappy ones really quick to show you the point. Bring this little mic in, and then add some tracks. I'm going to add audio tracks, 3 of them. 1, 2. Okay. I'm going to get rid of the mutes and okay. Check, check, check. Testing. Okay, cool. So we're coming in. I like ice cream. Anyone like the Music Man? Okay, so I'm gonna record myself singing something. It's probably not gonna sound great, but this is to show you the audio alignment tool. I like ice cream. All this stuff playing in the background. Let's see. I like ice cream. I like ice cream. So let's solo these. I'm gonna get rid of this mic. I like ice cream. So you can tell that I'm not like super in time with myself. I like ice cream. Especially on Cream. Let's say I liked the timing of this first take. I could go up here. I've got this event selected. I would just click Add Selection as a reference. And then the other two, or as many as you have, or just one, you can select, add as a target. It's going to match my words, which is cool because I was using words. I'm going to align the audio. So it, like, as you can see, did some editing. I like ice cream. It's like, it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was, I think. And it's a good starting spot to try and get some background vocals together. I would probably go in and change some of that stuff myself, but if you got like, sometimes you have, 6 or 10 like background vocals just stacked. And if you want to do a quick like try and glue them together, that might be a useful tool. Okay, enough of that. I'm gonna get rid of all those tracks. Shift H makes my tracks bigger so I can see them. Control mouse wheel zooms in and out, which I suppose we should talk about really quick before we go on to anything else. There's a couple ways to zoom. G and H if you're over, or just if you're anywhere, I think. Just zooms this, but I prefer to use my mouse wheel and control. It goes to wherever your mouse is. And then as far as the track height, that's Shift and G, or Shift and H. Plus Z if you want to make just one bigger.